next session is looking at two areas of media that I probably get the most questions about in terms of how to find new ways to measure both CTV and podcast advertising. They've both got different challenges in terms of environments and different identifiers. So we're really lucky today to have the Kantar team joining us to give us some case study on both of those, podcasts and CTV. And we're joined by Vanessa and Andreea Chirila from Kantar, who are going to take us through some learning, some first in the market, I hear, which we love first in the market. So I'll get you guys to share your screen and take over. Thanks, both.
Thanks, Gay. Well, hi everyone. Hope everyone's good morning, and thanks to Andy for the previous session. I hope everyone's got a coffee and maybe a cookie to go with your coffee, because you know those cookies might disappear by the end of our conversation. So just wanted to take you through a little bit of an update. I don't know whether you would have seen some of our media reactions report recently, just on where we are at with the digital future. And what a really interesting thing is that we've seen is that consumers are spending more time on music and video streaming services during lockdown, and it's kind of opened up a greater acceleration to digital in a nutshell. So we're seeing exposure to ads rise, giving them a better chance to kind of set themselves apart, especially in types of ads like podcast ads and TVC ads on connected TV. And also ads on music streaming services and video services are really now being considered more innovative. So another part of the report that we're seeing is that there's a lot of emphasis on the types of improvements that we're seeing from online channels in terms of ad equity among consumers. So it's really interesting to see how much they've increased since 2020 in 2021, which is actually being really well received by consumers, and we can see real uplifts in these types of ads across these different channels, which is amazing. But I guess one of the things that is really standing out, and I know that it's a hot topic at the moment, is how we're measuring in a cookieless digital world. We're seeing a lot of new challenges about how we're actually going to measure this, as we all know. So, but I guess one of the other call outs of what we're seeing in recent reports is that agencies and advertisers are not the only ones worried. They used to be just publishers, but actually everyone's worried about it. So we're trying to meet that challenge and look at different ways that we can actually see what we can do to kind of solve the solution. So because the future of advertising shouldn't, just collapse because the cookie crumbles. We need to just adopt more targeting and measurement opportunities to maximize ROI. And we'll show this coming forward in some of the insights that we're about to show. So one of the main things that I guess what we wanted to kind of highlight, and you'll see this in some successful results for the digital first for podcasts and CTVs coming up, is that we're really looking at a holistic digital solution across devices and platforms, because we all are feeling the need to navigate this new digital ecosystem with the right mindset. And it kind of will show exactly the different types of approaches we can do. So looking at this diagram, we know that, we can use tags today. We can use direct integrations with ID mapping and ID matching, but that's only going to solve part of the problem. So basically, there's still going to be that gap of untrackable impressions that we can't measure deterministically. So we need some type of solution, a hybrid approach, if you will, to kind of make sure that we're capturing everything and we're able to measure these effectively. So the way we've approached it for connected TV and podcasts are relatively similar. But I guess the difference is that for connected TV and AVOD ads, it's a, you know, you're seeing these types of ads in front of you, whereas for podcasts, you're listening to them. So they're slightly different. But there is a similar methodology that we can use for different types of cookieless tracking, which can be applied in both scenarios. And so what we're trying to say is that both can benefit from these types of solutions. It's just that one at the moment relies on tagging and data points such as IP to actually use that for a CTV environment, whereas podcasts, and we're doing this with a direct integration approach for the solution that we're using. So we're actually matching first-party data to allow for those data points. So the exciting thing that we wanted to show everyone was we ran a series of campaigns for a tech provider, and one of them was for a podcast campaign. And so it's actually a leading first because we've actually applied, as I was said previously, some direct integration data and using a modeled approach in hybrid with that to create some successful results. So looking at Brandlift methodology, it's pretty, this is a pretty standard approach that a lot of people use. So to date, it's largely been relying on cookie-based modeled or forced exposure methods for outputs. But when you use that as this approach as a basis, we can then build on that with new innovative approaches to kind of use that deterministic data plus a modeled approach to kind of get that real holistic view. So in the case for CTV and podcasts, we're using that type of first party data match or direct exposure match to kind of really hit home to be able to measure these campaigns effectively. So how do we do that? Pretty much the first one that we're excited about is a podcast methodology. So we're using household exposure using passive direct integration data. In this case, we worked with Acast to be able to directly match their exposure data for the campaigns on the ad level. And then basically, obviously, we wanted to measure that exposure against the respondent level data. So we're using that unique respondent level data, applying an opportunity to hear method, and then we're able to see and identify how that impact is having to determine campaign and media impact. It's similar for CTV, but obviously we're not using an opportunity to hear approach, we're using an opportunity to see approach. In this case, for this campaign that we used across multiple broadcasters in market, we used a tagged data approach rather than a direct integration, but they're still based on cookieless approaches. So it's kind of bypassing that type of cookie approach that we've all been relying on, and we're using it, and then we're using it to match at a respondent level, and once again seeing an impact off of those by including those type of opportunity to see impacts as filters. And now I'll hand over to Andreea for some insightful success.
Thank you so much, Naz. So starting with an example from a CTV campaign for a tech brand, this chart here displayed shows how we can actually show the results across CTV performance. So in gray bars, we have our control group, and in blue, our exposed, and the difference between the two is displayed in the circles above each of the KPI. The green circles mean that we are seeing a significant increase at a 90% confidence level, the yellow at an 80% confidence level, while the arrow indicates that the results approach the 80% significance levels. So based on the results of this particular campaign, we can see that the campaign generated strong recall, so that online ad awareness KPI, and this in turn translated into the bottom funnel metrics, so stronger favorability for the brand and significant purchase intent lift. And in this particular case, this was a great result. And this solution was implemented across all Australian publishers successfully. And we have so far done over 20 CTV studies and already 4 podcast BLIs. We do have to highlight the fact that when we display these results, the data goes through a thorough process of cleaning, weighting, but also removal of potential irrelevant respondents through those filters that Ness explained earlier. So the opportunity to see or opportunity to hear filters. And this type of filter is a refinement step in the methodology that really allows us to get the best of a deterministic and probabilistic approach. When we apply these filters, we actually see more intuitive impacts on brand metrics from ad exposure, because we measure the impact against the exposed individual rather than the household. And as you can see in this particular example, looking there on the left-hand side for online ad awareness, that 5.4, you can see how a non-significant at 90% confidence level impact, that 5.4, on ad awareness with a control group of 250 and an exposed group of 150 converted into a significant impact of 8.7 once we removed 50% of the respondents that actually in reality had a very low probability of being exposed to the ads as found through those filters. And this really helps us be incredibly confident of the robustness of our results. And using an example from a recent ACAS study that we conducted, this methodology also allows us to understand how the results sit against Kantar benchmarks for each of the metrics of interest. This allows us to put everything into perspective and identify which KPI in particular requires further work. And as you can see in the chart there on the bottom of the slide, we can classify metrics as either below average, average, above average, or excellent versus Kantar norms. Okay, so now that we had a look at how we can display results, I would like to take you through some of the main learnings that we found as part of these studies. We're going to start with podcasts, and we know that podcasts can allow brands to enter an intimate space with engaged audiences. And some of the main learnings surround, for example, the need for a simple message, so that we can avoid confusion for listeners. The importance of branding and how we link that with the audio cues. But also the importance of telling a story so that we can trigger what we call the theater of the mind for our listeners. Last but not least, we want the brand sound to use well-established audio cues such as theme music or sonic brand triggers. In terms of CTV learnings, we can see some common themes here versus what we've actually seen in podcast studies, such as message simplicity or brand linkage, but also creative length. Length matters. We know, for example, that 15 seconds can contribute significantly on brand if the creative is on point and the brand is established, but longer durations can work better for new launches. Last but not least, frequency matters. And depending on your creative length and campaign duration, different frequency ranges will be optimal for your brand. So in summary, the CTV podcast Brandlift study, the CTV and podcast Brandlift studies that we can do at Kantar use a combination of deterministic and probabilistic methods together with creative evaluation in order to give a holistic picture of your campaign performance from a brand impact perspective. Thank you very